Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass. Thank you for watching this Ag Forecast, brought to you by Agrible, the makers of Morning Farm Report. Our software gives growers the insights to make the best decisions possible about their operations. Well, this figure here really sums up harvest so far this year. What you're looking at is the statewide precipitation ranks for the month of October. Now, in the United States, we have a 123-year record, which means the closer you get to 123, you're talking about your wettest years on record, closer to 1, your driest. What we can see is that after kind of drier times throughout our growing season, we ended up coming in quite wet for harvest. And this is what's really made for quite a few delays across the Corn Belt getting the corn out. And some folks have been extremely wet, while others have been able to have a great harvest. It's been very kind of hit or miss. But if we take a little bit closer look at that finer detail, it looks something like this. Here's our last 30 days of precipitation expressed as a percent of normal. So wetter than averages on this side of the color spectrum, drier than averages here. What you can see is that, wow, look, parts of Iowa soaked, absolutely soaked in some regions, but other parts have been dry. Got a nice little wedge right here in parts of central Illinois that didn't get some of the bigger lines of storms and showers that the northern and southern half of the state got. But when you put all this together, this is a pretty big chunk of real estate in the Corn Belt that has had untimely rains keeping folks out of the fields. And so we are certainly behind on corn, although soybeans were gotten out pretty quickly. So this is kind of our backdrop, and we want to basically take this and say, okay, we still have some harvest left to do. What does rain look like in the coming days? So this is going to be an animation from the 0Z GFS taking out the next 10 days. And basically what we see is over the next 10 days, we've got some precipitation again coming into the eastern Corn Belt. So I want to take a look at when exactly this is going to be getting here, because we've had a relatively dry week after last weekend's severe weather. So here we are, we're on Thursday, early Thursday morning. You can see that as I step forward here, the next system that comes through, a little shortwave trough, comes through probably by Sunday. And what's going to happen here is as that feature comes through late Saturday night into Sunday, we have the first chances for seeing some precipitation, parts of Iowa, and Illinois, Missouri, parts of Wisconsin, Michigan. But this is not going to be the big precipitation maker. That's just our first chances of some precipitation coming through. Then what we see is after that, things kind of calm down a little bit. Notice how we're not accumulating much rain across the Corn Belt until we get into about the Tuesday into Wednesday time frame. And that's when our second system comes through. So we got a couple of shots coming up here in terms of rain in the next 10 days. And then the third time kind of hits pretty far south of the Corn Belt, but it's down here in parts of Missouri, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Kentucky. And that's again coming about a week from now. So the point is that the flow pattern is active such that it's kind of riding over a ridge out here at times that's occupying really the Four Corners area. The flow kind of dips to the south and brings with it these clipper systems. That same flow is just inundating the northwest with some pretty strong onshore flow, bringing them quite a bit of precipitation. So very wet outside of that ridge for the next 10 days. Well, if we take that and look at how this all kind of shapes up in terms of the flow of the atmosphere, what I've animated for you here is the position of the jet stream for the next 10 days as well. And as we've been discussing, this is going to be an up-down kind of thing. It's going to warm up, get above average temperature, then a big trough will come through and cool things off. And that pattern's going to hang on like it usually does this time of year. But I just want to tell you, kind of looking at the overall trough ridge system across the northern hemisphere here, it is very, very active and really kind of resisting some large-scale blocking. But let's start off on Thursday. This is the big feature to end our week. Great big trough here sitting over the Hudson Bay. And this is going to swing through Thursday into Friday with a big cold front, really knocking temperatures back for the start of the weekend. What we see is as that shifts on through, by the time we get past Friday, getting into here we are getting into Saturday, the next system that comes through and gives us that chance of rain for the weekend is this shortwave right here. So basically when the atmosphere dips into these little troughs, that supports lifting motion in the atmosphere, and that's what creates clouds and precipitation. So that is our first chance of rain moving forward into the weekend. But notice this, big deep trough digs in the Gulf of Alaska, and if that pattern really hangs on for a couple of days, after the little weak trough moves out, we start to build a broader ridge across the central part of the country. So while the eastern third of the country will be cold, a ridge builds into the center part of the country such that we get into, the 13th of November, and we start to warm up here across the center states. And what happens is we kind of see that hanging on until, again, we have another trough coming through. This is that next chance of rain, Wednesday, Thursday of next week, coming through parts of the Corn Belt here. But notice everything is just really active. Go from the east to the west. Trough, ridge, trough, ridge, trough, ridge, trough, ridge. I mean, it's just really, really active. But I think at times we will see some surges of some warmer air coming into the central U.S., not necessarily the east or the west coast, but in the central United States. And if we look in the short term, this is what we've got. Here's an animation here of surface temperature anomalies getting us all the way out to the 18th. Watch it again here. Here's the big shot of cold air coming in on Thursday and Friday. That's going to be basically supported by that deep upper level trough. Warmer temperatures out west, big plunging cold front here in the east. We're going to see that hanging on through our weekend for the eastern half of the country. But then as that little system, kind of goes on through and the next little trough comes wiggling its way through on Sunday, again, that's our next chance for precipitation on the Corn Belt. We see that temperatures really don't plummet too far below average, but basically for the next 5 days, the eastern half of the country is going to be seeing below normal temperatures. But remember what I said, as that trough digs out east and as the trough digs out west, the center part of the country will start to see some rebounding in their temperatures. And as we move through parts of next week, here we are on Wednesday of next week, we're seeing that warmer air occupying quite a bit of the country. And even as that cold front comes through Wednesday into Thursday of next week, it's not able to really knock temperatures way back below average. And again, another little ridge builds in the center part of the country. So, this is, again, pointing to that up-down nature of all of this. But when we stretch the whole month out, what we really tend to see, and I agree with the ECMWF, that's the European model on this one, is that we're going to be seeing more often these trough features plunging across parts of Canada, bringing in some already established cooler air in parts of these provinces of Canada, and just diving it south into the Corn Belt. I would say that this area I'm kind of highlighting right here has a better chance at times for the next 32 days of seeing near average to above average temperatures, but a couple of big events will help keep the whole thing cool. Certainly a cool month for the Northeast. So this is the overall, temperature anomaly map for the next month, getting us into the 8th of December. Now, one of the big drivers of all of this is this feature here. So this is our developing La Nina. It's still weak, even though we have a pretty substantially large area of cooler sea surface temperatures. And why we call that weak is that we have to watch for a full and permanent atmospheric response to the sea surface temperatures. And at times we're seeing it, and other times we're not. So we need to talk about this, because if this stays established such that we have cool sea surface temperatures butting up against South America and then, of course, stretching across the equatorial Pacific, this may mean that the weather pattern that we're seeing right now across much of the United States could likely be our setup for the start of winter. I'm talking here about December, maybe early January. So we got to be on the lookout for this, because we are seeing this northwestern flow pattern in the jet stream with the trough over the Hudson Bay, kind of a plunging trough across the western part of the country, and that's important to see. So some cool work here was done by NOAA, and they went back and looked at kind of the bigger, La Nina events going back to 1950. And with the exception of 4 years, so this is winter time, December through February temperature anomalies, with the exception of 4 years, 1999 to 2000, 98, 99, 2011, 2012, and 2005-06, we see a pretty similar pattern with a cool Corn Belt for the most part. A lot of years having a pretty strong signal of that cooler Corn Belt. You can really see the features showing up here. Now, just want to point something out. The winter of 2011-2012, we were seeing a transition in the equatorial Pacific out of a La Nina. And in addition to that, that particular year, the Arctic Oscillation, which was more commonly referred to as the polar vortex, despite the La Nina, ended up being very, very strong. And what that means is that traps a lot of the cold air way up far into the northern hemisphere, near the North Pole, never allowing it to come down. And that's why we saw this. So there's always an interplay between a lot of different atmospheric features. But the only one that we can look at now as a good indicator is La Nina. It's a much longer cycle in terms of weather. We'll have to wait till we get into December and January and February to see if the Arctic Oscillation or the North Atlantic Oscillation or the Pacific North American pattern at any given time can really alter things. But there's some pretty concrete evidence, as you've kind of been looking at this image now, that we tend to get kind of the flow pattern that you see here, maybe in 1955-56 or 84-85, where we're really going to see some cooler air plunging in across the northern states. Pretty strong evidence, too, of a warm bias across the southern states for this winter. Where this also plays an important role is when we talk about South America. And I want to show you some research we did here to kind of show you why South Americans that do soybean farming don't really like La Nina events like these. You see what you're looking at here is the correlation of sea surface temperatures. So that's what's color-coded here. with December through February with soybean yields out of South America. So let me get you oriented to what you're seeing here. If we saw a sea surface temperature map where the cool colors are cooler than average and the warm colors are warmer than average, that looked just like this for December through February, that would mean that that particular feature, sea surface temperatures, are perfectly well aligned for big yields across South America. So what we're seeing is a little bit different pattern. For example, the forecast by the National Multimodal Ensemble keeps, this weak to moderate La Nina here with near average to cooler than average temperatures butting up against the coast of South America, which we've already seen. You see, the correlation would say, no, we want some warm temperatures there. We want that La Nina to be really stuck out very weakly in the middle of the Pacific, not running up against kind of the west coast of South America. And secondly, on the other side, you can see down here that we would prefer to have cooler sea surface temperatures off the coast of Argentina, and we're forecast to have warm down there. So this is just one weather feature that's not lining up perfectly with having record yields in South America, which is what we've been talking about for a while now. Plus, we already know the planting delays that have happened there. So a lot to talk about, lot looking out in a longer term here that we need to digest. But it certainly means that South America has a lower and lower probability with each forecast and each day that passes by of having another massive crop in terms of their soybeans. And this is, of course, going to impact their safrinha crop, which is that corn crop that comes second. And with that, I think I'll wrap up this forecast video. We hope you look forward to Agrible's next ag forecast coming out on Monday. To get Morning Farm Report for your operations, with a daily email that shows you a snapshot of your field conditions each morning, go to morningfarmreport.com. Sign up for a free account. Full grower accounts are free if you sign up for our Sustainable Yield program or for growers who work with AD merchandisers. Look forward to talking again after the weekend.